Hi everybody, I am Jordan Craig, and welcome and thank you so much for coming to Austin and taking part in the conference that Austin Pets Alive is putting on. We really appreciate your participation. So as I said, I am with Austin Animal Services, and I have been lucky enough to be with the organization for the last 6 years. I basically came on board right around the time that Austin actually achieved its no-kill status. So I've seen a lot of the different adaptations and things that we've gone through during that time. In my 6 years, 4 of those I worked directly in intake. I started my customer service days in intake, and then I later monitored that division before later going to animal care. So a little bit about how this all got started. I know a lot of you have heard this in some of the other presentations as well, but City Council approved a 34-point no-kill plan for the city of Austin in March of 2010. And by October of 2010, we needed to have at least some kind of plan on how to get this achieved. So a lot of you might be in those beginning stages and trying to figure out how to even get your first step started. So we're here to help you kind of let you know what some of those options are, what our first steps were, and hopefully help you along your way. So in February 2011, we surpassed the goal of 90% with 92%. And a part of the plan was asking that we decrease shelter intake, decrease the owner surrenders, and enhance targeted intake prevention efforts in the community through spay and neuter, as well as increase feral cat live outcome. So reduce the number of free roaming cats killed in the shelter each year. So first of all, with managed intake of found animals, we closed the drop boxes. Austin had 24-hour drop boxes open for decades. It was a lot of the community culture that if you needed help and you wanted to drop an animal off at any hour of the day, you could do so. And those, I think there were 12 of them. I literally started weeks after these boxes closed, and just doing that made a huge difference. So limiting the amount of time that people have to bring animals to your shelter helps, and you then have conversations with the people as opposed to them coming in the middle of the night, dropping off, the 6 kittens, dropping off the mama cat that's going to have babies. You find out more information by just closing those boxes. So if any of your communities you still have those, we definitely recommend. That makes a huge difference. Next, we limited where we were taking our found animals from. We limited it to our jurisdiction, the city of Austin and/or Travis County. We first need to achieve no kill and succeed within our exact area before we can spread the mission. So the ways that we did this is when we first started, we always had people fill out intake forms, and many people probably are using intake forms. We changed several years into having a conversation as opposed to having people fill out just a form. We found that when people were filling out the form, we got their information, but we might not be able to really read it. We would take the information because we all know intake gets chaotic. You're running around, someone hands you a form, you say, thank you, have a nice day, but then later you're looking at it and says, oh, I found this animal on the street. Well, what street? Where did this animal come from? What background does it have? Do you know anything about the animal? So instead of just intake paperwork, we changed to having intake conversations. So when a customer comes to us that's found an animal, we ask for a valid photo ID, ideally with an address, mostly because most people have found the animal in the area where they live, and we're just tracking where these animals are coming from. So we get an ID and we have a conversation with them, and sometimes you find these aren't actually found animals. Sometimes they're their animals, and we'll talk about owned animal intake next. But it's really important, and sometimes, let's say they've had it for a week, you get some vital behavioral information about that animal. And with the cats, I'll talk a little bit later about our shelter neuter return program, but it's so important that we get exact information about where that animal was found. People tend to give generalized answers. I found this animal at Dean Keaton and I-35. You probably didn't find the cat running down that street. You want to find exactly where they are. Maybe they found it on campus. Maybe they found it across at Haymaker, the restaurant that's just in that vicinity, but that's the closest place they can think of. So it's really important to get exact information for the safety of the animals. Also, we always scan the animal. We scan at intake while the customer is still there, and our vet services scans later just to make sure nothing was missed. It's very important because if you can find a microchip at intake, send that cat home with the finder. Get in touch with the person. Even if you can't get in touch with the person and they live down the street, send them home with the finder to go home. It will lower your numbers and it sets that animal for the most success. If you can limit that animal from coming into the shelter where it could be exposed to a number of different diseases, and it's just, you don't have to use your resources. It can go directly home. So always scan. If the person is not able to take the animal directly home, offer a found report. We have these in our database, so we can print them really quickly, and I would recommend looking into whether or not you can. You can have a basic Word document that you just change some of the wording on and print pretty easily, but it's very convenient if your database can just print one right out. You send a handful with the finder, and even if they can't take it back, they'll post the area where they found it. So that saves animal protection having to go out and post in the area, and it also is a better success for the animal. And again, we will discuss our shelter neuter return option. If a cat is healthy, which, like I said, we'll go over a little bit later, but if the cat is healthy and eligible for the program, it will be returned to the area found anyway once sterilized. So it's very important that that finder knows that information about that cat. So if they opt, hey, I really don't think this cat should be returned to the area even though it meets that criteria, they have the option of keeping and making a found report and it being posted on our website for the next 2 weeks while they advocate in their neighborhood and try to find the owner, and if unable to find the owner, try to then rehome. Another thing that can be very challenging during kitten season. What do you do with the endless kittens coming through your door, especially the ones that come without the moms? It's a hard conversation to have. I'm sure most of you have had it. We push as hard as possible while still being, very courteous for the kittens to be put back where they're found unless there is a known vacancy of that mother. Clearly, if they know that their dog got into a fight with the cat or the cat got hit by a car, we're going to take those kittens immediately. But if this is just a good Samaritan that has found, 3 or 4 kittens hanging out under their house and rushed it over to the shelter, we will have that conversation and say, please put the kittens back. It's a good time to educate, and even if they refuse that first time, they're going to think twice before scooping up that next litter of kittens, and if they've taken that batch, that mama's going to have kittens real soon. So it's really important to have that uncomfortable conversation because, and I say uncomfortable, if none of you have ever been in that situation, people feel like they have just saved these lives, and then you tell them they did the wrong thing. And so you have to do it very respectfully and just take that moment to educate. And like I said, sometimes they won't take them back because they're still worried for the safety for the kitten. But the best thing for them, if the mom is still there, is to go back there and then discuss options for targeted TNR later, once those kittens have been weaned, and get them in for the foster program. Another recent situation we found ourselves in during high capacity season, we're euthanizing very few animals and we're not euthanizing for space. So when we fill up, we reach out to the community. We're completely transparent and we say, we need help. We can't do this. We can't keep taking these animals in. We need your help. We need you to hold on to them until we can make space. And during those times, we run adoption specials, we plead to emergency fosters, we beg to rescue partners. But in the meantime, whether it be a day, a week, we let them know that we need to put intakes on hold unless they are true emergencies. And it's been challenging at first. The community is used to us being there to support them, but if your community truly wants to succeed and to have a no-kill city, it takes an army of people. It doesn't just take the shelter, it takes all of us. So it's really important, again, to just be as transparent as possible and let them know we're not willing to euthanize for space, so we need your help. And overall, the message goes pretty well. You'd be surprised. Again, another challenging conversation, but the benefit is so important. And luckily, we only have had to do that during peak kitten season and also after disasters, but still, it is important to keep track of your numbers inside and know when you have to go into the extra management intake mode. And And sometimes you might not need to manage across the board. You can still take in dogs, but you have no space for cats. So it's really important to check your numbers every single day so that you can communicate with your frontline intake team. So we also do managed intake for owned animals. This started immediately in 2011, and we've been doing it ever since. At first, it was, can you wait a couple of days? And while a couple of days doesn't seem like much, doesn't seem like you'll get that many animals out of your shelter in that amount of time, it at least makes you not the easy answer. So many communities, and especially ones that start with drop boxes like we did, the community wants to come to you first. If they're moving all of a sudden or something has come up, they knew they could come to us and just drop the animal off. We need, again, the support from the community and understanding that sometimes we can't take right away. And have you asked anyone? Have you reached out to other places? Has there been planning in place? So it's been a lot of education. And like I said, in the beginning, it was a couple of days that we would push back. Currently, we are scheduling intakes about 6 weeks out. And we only take in 4 kennels worth of animals a day. So that could be a litter of kittens that's going to go into one kennel, or it could be 4 adult cats that aren't housed together, or dogs. So we take in 4 a day, and we also used to do owner surrenders during our regular hours. We have changed that policy as well. We now take in owner surrenders before we're open for a stray intake because we find we're getting more valuable information. Again, intake area, at least at our shelter, is quite hectic. Owners don't feel very comfortable speaking in a room full of other people about what their real issues are, what the issues with the animal are, what things that we need if we're going to rehome them, or even if we might find ourselves in that position that we can actually help them. Maybe they don't need to surrender because they finally opened up and let us know what the bottom line issue is, and we may have resources for them. So I recommend, if you can't set it outside your normal hours, at least find, if you have one in your location, a private place to have that conversation with them. Our intake is just not set up very well to have those private conversations, so that's why we've been doing it earlier in the day. Also, so during those 6 weeks, we're trying our hardest to provide resources to help them rehome the animal or keep the animal. We all know cats don't do well in the shelter, especially your middle-aged to older-age cats that have always been in a home. They come in and are completely stressed out. So the best thing we can do for our cat population is to never let them set a foot in the cage. While they'll be safe in our kennels, they're still not happy, they may not eat, so we need to set them up for as much success as possible and go from home to home. So we will do whatever we can to keep the animal out of our shelter or get it directly placed. So luckily, Austin has some low-cost vet care options and partnerships. I would definitely, whichever community you're in, reach out, find out what those are, and if you don't have some vets that are already doing it, at least find out if they'd be willing to help if it meant an animal didn't have to be surrendered. Sometimes they will be able to be a little more flexible than you think. Also, temporary boarding options. In Austin, we're very lucky. There's been the PASS program, the Positive Alternative to Shelter Surrender program through Austin Pets Alive, that has helped with temporary boarding. So let's say there's a family emergency and you don't have anyone to watch your animals, you need to leave town for a couple weeks to a month. They can help you with temporary boarding so you don't have to relinquish the ownership of your pet. Also, if you find yourself suddenly in between houses, you know you're going to find a place, but you've got about a month until then, you're staying with a friend, you need someone to watch your animal. That's when the temporary boarding comes in handy. And again, if you don't have an organization that already has that in place, reach out to boarding facilities, reach out to vet clinics, find out what it would take to create a program like that in order to save those cats and keep them in their homes. Because we find ourselves so often struggling to find these new homes for these animals, but if we could just keep them there, keep them where they're happy and comfortable, that's my dream at least. Also, some people find themselves on hard times and just simply can't feed the animals. We have a pet food bank that is set up in our community, and it gets donations from several different organizations. People drop off at our location donations that get transported to the food bank. So if you don't have one, or if you have one that's dedicated to people at this time, see if they're willing to open it up to also helping to feed animals. You get a lot of different donations, and you can at least support some of the community that way. Also, if none of these are options and the animal needs veterinary assistance, we do have some veterinary assistance vouchers that we can share with the community if it will keep an animal from being surrendered to our shelter and keep it in its home. So about that veterinary assistance program, we partner in our community with what was Animal Trustees and is now the Partnership of Animal Trustees and Emancipet, just under the Emancipet title. And when we first started No Kill, we actually had a separate voucher program that we would issue vouchers to the community when they would come in and ask to surrender a pet, and they could take it to any vet. That became problematic. We were having vets then refer people that couldn't afford their costs, that weren't looking to surrender their pets, but were just looking for help paying for vet bills, and not the people that were in desperate need and on the brink of surrendering ownership. So we reeled it back in, and about a year later, we ran out our veterinary assistance program with Animal Trustees, and we offer $250 to $500 to support the cost of treatment. We recognize that that's not always going to treat the entire issue, but sometimes paying part of the cost is enough to have someone keep their animals. And with those, we assist them with an injury or a non-contagious disease. So we can help if they have Demodex. We can help if they have a broken leg. We can help if they need an eye enucleated or wound care. So these things that can be they can be quite costly, even for someone with money. And so someone that is struggling to get by and suddenly something happens to their animal, we can be there to support that and keep it into their homes. So depending on what your budget is, really we don't see this reducing a huge amount, but it reduces those animals that then would come into our program and be in our program for a long time while we are treating their condition. So it helps with lengths of stay by keeping these critical cases out. Also, let's see, in 2014, we rolled out our community cat program. This is another way to keep cats out of our shelter and from being impounded into the shelter environment. Austin Humane Society has had a trap neuter program in for several years, and we'd had the shelter neuter return program, but we found there was a gap. There were these people that were calling and saying there are cats in our area, we don't know what to do. Yes, we can rent a trap from the Humane Society, but I don't have anywhere for them to recover, and I don't have the time to do the trap neuter return, but this mama just keeps having babies. So the community cat program grew out of that problem. It partners again with the Austin Humane Society, and about 100 to 120 cats a month go through this program. And the way it works is, again, somebody will contact us and say, there's this mama that just keeps having babies in this area. And we'll ask, well, are you interested in helping us trap the cat? And if they are, we will get them paperwork to become an active volunteer to come in and do an orientation, learn how to do the trapping. And we have on our location a small building. We call it our little mobile mini, and it is temperature controlled. And so people can drop off their trapped cats 24/7. So not have to wait until, maybe they trap it in the afternoon and it's really hot out and then they're waiting for a surgery day 2 or 3 days later. They can bring it to us immediately. It'll stay there. The Humane Society picks up every morning at 9 a.m. and they drop off the cats that went through surgery the day before at 10. So no cat is staying in there longer than 24 hours. And while they're in there, they stay in their trap, but we provide them with wet food. That way they can get hydration and food. We do limit the amount just because they are getting surgery the next day. So we don't want them eating a whole lot. But they have a safe place that's less stressful than being pulled out of a trap, vaccinated, put back into another cage, and then transferred. So we want to minimize their stress as much as possible and also make sure they're safe. So this program, the Humane Society picks them up, takes them to their location, does the surgery, the ear tip, the rabies vaccination, and brings them back the following day. And so they have the overnight at the Humane Society after surgery. So when the trapper or the volunteer picks up the next morning, they can then release them. as long as it's a good time of day. But again, they have another 24 hours to pick it up, so if they wanted to wait till the evening hours during peak summer months. We've found this to be a very successful program, and if you are not one of those people that's able to volunteer, we get your name and your information to one of our 62 volunteers, and they'll get in touch with you and come trap the cat for you. So this is helping with targeted TNR through our volunteers. We do have an outreach program that's been working to kind of work on spay and neuter and trapping in these areas, but it was just not enough. There's just so many more cats every year than we can actually trap. So by broadening our horizons every single year and increasing this volunteer base, we're going to get more cats fixed. So this is, again, is a nice middle ground, and if you have, it doesn't have to be a separate building, it doesn't have to be a fancy place, but if you have somewhere that they could safely come 24/7 and bring the animals, and you could work with them on fixing them, this could really help a lot of communities. So again, I talked a little bit earlier about shelter, neuter, return. This is a program that if you can't keep the animal out of the shelter, this is the first pathway option that we look at for cats. If an animal is over 3 months of age, over 3 pounds, good body condition, has a history of living outdoors, or at least no known history of living indoors, doesn't have any sign of ownership, no microchip, and the location it was found is residential or safe, lots of cats in the area, we're going to opt for this program first. We did recently make a change that we're not going to be sending kittens under 6 months of age through the shelter neuter return program unless we are in peak kitten season or at space like critical capacity. But the rest of the year, the 6-month-old kittens will stay for our adoption program. But anything over that will go through this still as their first pathway. So this is a way we can really shorten the length of stay that these animals are in our shelter and get them back to the community from where they come. So we partner with the Humane Society, and at the Humane Society they are sterilized, ear-tipped, microchipped, and get a rabies vaccination. And the community cat program, we do not microchip, but we do microchip for the shelter neuter return program. And often these cats are a bit more social than the cats that we get through the traditional trap neuter return through the community cats. So we like to know when these cats are coming back to us that these are a cat that, yes, went through this specific program. We can see how recently they went through the program. Are they succeeding? Are they still healthy? And that way we can make a best judgment call if they come through a second time whether or not they're going to return. Oh, and one other thing about the shelter neuter return program, if you do put one of these programs into place, make sure you talk to the public about it. Make sure you discuss at the time of intake with the customer that this is the program the animal's going through. Not everyone is supportive right away of, again, they feel that they save this animal, it's coming to your shelter, it's going up for adoption, and then you tell them it's coming back. But you want to explain to them the benefit of the program and that this really does give more time to the cats that have no other option to find those forever homes. These animals have a home in the community. We want to keep it that way if they're surviving and they're healthy. If shelter neuter return is not an option, obviously we will keep them for adoption if temperament is friendly and we can handle safely and they can be housed at our shelter. If they can't, we do partner with Austin Pets Alive for barn placement. We will flag these animals as potential barn placement candidates and let the Austin Pets Alive know. They have people that come in daily and check these animals and will tell us, yes, I definitely agree this animal is a good barn candidate, or if they feel there's other options, we'll explore those. So if they decide that the animal is a good candidate for barn placement, at our location, we will do the surgery, we will do ear tip, microchip, rabies vaccination, and sterilization. And what's unique to the barn program compared to the others is that we absolutely do a feline leukemia, feline AIDS test. They're not going to the place where they came from. They're going to a completely new population, likely with other animals. So it's very important that you do test to make sure you're not going to be spreading disease to a new location. So we do all of that at our location. As long as everything goes well and the test is negative, they'll be transferred to Austin Pets Alive where they are housed in their barn program until they find placement options for them. And luckily right now they have a wait list. So our total live outcome rate for cats, before no kill, you can see In 2007, we were only saving about 32%. And this year, you know, less than 10 years later, we're saving 96%. It can be done. And as you see, in 2011, as we did our soft start to no-kill, with cats, it was a little lower of a number than dogs, and it took a bit longer, but we did get there by 2012. And just making these changes that I've discussed with you today, it can get you there. Thank you all so much for coming in today and hearing the presentation, and I will open the floor for any questions you might have.